From the City of Angels near the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later on tonight, a walk on the paranormal side. Here's what's happening. A train containing one car of hazardous materials has derailed in Van Buren Township outside of Detroit, Michigan. The cause of that derailment not yet immediately clear. Police say there were no injuries in the area, and it's not a hazmat situation, thank God. The derailment comes less than 2 weeks after a train carrying toxic chemicals derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. 750 fish died in that mishap, and people are concerned about themselves, obviously. Tesla recalling nearly 363,000 vehicles equipped with full self-driving beta over a potential crash risk. The electric car company confirmed it's recalling certain 2016 to 23 Model S, Model X, 2017 to 23 Model 3s, 2020 to 23 Model Y vehicles equipped with full self-driving beta software or pending installation. The family of Bruce Willis has announced that the actor is suffering from a form of dementia called frontal temporal dementia, or FTD for short. In a statement, the 67-year-old star's family stated that while the news is painful, it is a relief to finally have a clear diagnosis of what he has. According to the Mayo Clinic, frontotemporal dementia is an umbrella term for a group of brain disorders that primarily affects the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. These areas of the brain are generally associated with personality, behavior, and language. A study offering even more evidence of the harmful effects of sugar. The research published in the journal BMC Medicine found that diets higher in free sugars, those are a category that includes sugar added to processed foods and sodas, as well as that found in fruit juice and syrups, raises one's risk of heart disease and stroke. Who better to answer this but Christian Weil from myheartbook.com. Christian, what can you tell us about this one?
Well, George, this Oxford study said that the most common forms of sugar eaten were found in preserves and confectionery, which includes cookies and sugary pastries, fruit juices, sugar-sweetened beverages like soft drinks, increases the risk of heart attack and stroke immeasurably. Earlier today, George, while getting through the checkout stand at the market, before I read the news article you sent me, I bought a cookie, and it's sitting right here next to my keyboard tonight, and no matter what Cody's study finds, I'm sorry, but I'm still going to eat this cookie while you're talking tonight. You may find this additional information interesting, George. From another study from the NHS, interestingly, according to their findings and their guidelines, adults should have no more than 30 grams of free sugars, which are the equivalent to several sugar cubes a day.
That's all. Gee,
so,
that's
yeah,
not a lot.
that's all you're allowed. So as a practical comparison for all of us tonight, how much sugar is in a Coca-Cola or any of the other cold drinks? So if a single can of Coca-Cola already has more than an adult's daily sugar allowance, and it's not unusual on a hot summer day for you and I and the others to drink 3 or 4 bottles of Coke or 7-Up or any of the other cold drinks, what does that do to the matrix for additional high risk of sugar intake for all of us? Something to be aware of.
Ice water for me, Christian. Christian's website, myheartbook.com. Thank you. A launch of a replacement spacecraft to retrieve a NASA astronaut and 2 Russian cosmonauts from the International Space Station after their ship suffered a massive coolant leak late last year. Remember that? Is now under review as engineers work to figure out the cause of a leak affecting a second Russian spacecraft. President Joe Biden said that 3 unmanned aerial objects shot down over the weekend by the U.S. military were most likely tied to private companies, recreation, or research institutions, and were not connected to the massive Chinese surveillance balloon that was shot down on Feb 4. But what are they? Kevin Randall's with us with his weekly UFO report. Kevin, this is still a strange story, isn't it?
Well, it's absolutely weird, George. And I've been thinking about these balloon attacks, and I've come at it from a slightly different perspective.
All right, what do you got?
There are two takeaways related to the UFO field that haven't been explored by the mainstream media. First, a couple of the statements by high-ranking officials made about the aliens or the possibility of the UFOs have an extraterrestrial component to them. And I noticed they called them UFOs rather than UAPs, as if attempting to separate UFOs from the UAPs. Is this an attempt to change the thinking of people by telling us that UFOs are not UAPs? And once that thinking has been altered, then when they begin to explain all the UAP sightings as having terrestrial explanations, they have eliminated a problem that has plagued them for 75 years. They tell us there is nothing to see here. In fact, there are some editorials already running down that road. And it should be pointed out there are about 1,800 balloons launched daily around the world.
Jeez.
They get caught up in wind currents, updrafts, and other weather phenomenon, but they don't seem to create the problems for the military that we've seen in the last week.
Right.
And second, in discussing why the balloons haven't been detected on radar, they mentioned that the military radars are set to discriminate between those targets that might be hostile and those that pose no threat. This means that aircraft and, well, balloons that are flying too slow simply are not displayed, and if they are too high and too fast, again, these get displayed. UFOs operating outside the parameters created by the programmers do not show up. That means that the military can say, honestly, that they have nothing on radar. And I will note that the military admitted their radars look for specific returns and will only display those that they're looking for rather than everything detected. And as I have said repeatedly, our stealth technology has rendered part of this argument irrelevant. That it doesn't show on radar doesn't mean it wasn't there, only that it wasn't detected. There are points that I noticed without invoking a conspiracy theory here that I must talk about.
Go ahead.
and that is where we begin to demystify the UFO phenomena as something that they've been trying to do since 1952, and this is their attempts to do that now. But it hasn't stopped the UFO reports. From Keene, New Hampshire, on February 11th of this year, the witness was outside in the early afternoon. The witness saw what at first appeared to be an airplane, but he'd seen airplanes overhead many times. This craft made no sound, was completely white, but without any metallic sheen. There were no navigation or anti-collision lights visible. There were no wings or tail section, and it was rectangular in shape. The witness took 2 pictures from a cell phone before the UFO disappeared. On February 10th of this year, 32 miles from Ozona, Texas, the witness said that 2 hunters said they had seen a triangular-shaped object that was dull and had solid white lights at the corners. The UFO hovered for a few minutes and then shot straight up. This witness also said that objects are seen on many nights. Although the witness had attempted to take pictures, they haven't turned out, and the problem may be the quality of the camera equipment he's using. In the past, I've investigated similar claims, that is, nightly sightings. In many of those cases, there are terrestrial explanations. One of the exceptions is the Marfa lights, and as it stands today, there's no accepted solution for the Marfa lights, and please note the qualification there. Marfa is about 200 miles from Ozona, and that's what we have for tonight, George.
All right, my friend, we'll talk to you next week. Kevin Randall. Up next, Jeffrey Seelman back with us. Are demonic spirits increasing, and what does that mean to us? Jeffrey's next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Jeffrey Seelman back with us. His new book is called Moving Energy. He is a professional clearing expert, teacher, author, psychic, and exorcist. After serving in the United States Air Force, thank you, Jeffrey, he studied metaphysical thought and philosophy during the 1980s. In 1992, Jeffrey brought his services to the public, to all of us. Jeffrey clears negative emotional energy as well as negative spirits from individuals, living environments, property, and businesses. He also teaches individuals how to protect themselves from the effects of negative emotional energy generated by people, living people, negative and demonic spirits, and methods to keep ourselves, families, and homes and businesses free and clear of accumulated negative emotional energy from the past and present. Jeffrey Seelman, back on Coast to Coast. Jeffrey, how are you?
George, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on the show.
I can't think of a better time to have you because I sense that there's a lot of demonic forces and negative energy out there, Jeffrey. How am I right?
It's coming from every direction, George. I've been doing this professionally, helping people for 34 years now, and I've never seen anything like it. When I started out, way back in the late 1980s, I thought things would get better and people would come together and all these things would happen, and they just didn't. And we've had more problems than ever, and we're not getting along with each other. And that means that it's ripe for attack by negative spirits and demonic spirits, which are two different kinds of spirits. But they're very powerful, and they know how to amplify somebody's anger and to get us to do things we would not normally do.
Jeffrey, in your opinion, what's causing this massive negativity?
Well, I think that it's the media, and we're not really very used to it. I was 37 years old when the internet came along, and I thought it was great, and I still do. Mm-hmm. But it's still some kind of new technology to us. And so we're not really balanced when it comes to dealing with the influx of information that may or may not be true and also could be upsetting us on an emotional level, getting us not to trust each other and other things like that. And so we have problems coming at us that we have not been used to before. When I was growing up, we had half an hour of news that was from around the country. Now it's 24 hours, so that's quite different. So I think that we're activating our angers that we have inside of ourselves by outside forces. Sometimes these things can be the media, even well-meaning media, and sometimes it can be other people who are deliberately trying to get us to be angry and angry at each other, and sometimes it can be things that we don't see with the naked eye, and that would be evil spirits.
What is an evil spirit? What is a demonic spirit, Jeffrey?
An evil spirit is a person who has passed on, like we all do, very common, very normal, George, who continues to do negative things. Probably were doing negative things when they were alive, and they're still doing negative things when they have passed on. Haven't changed a bit. I have said before in this show that I really don't believe that people change that much when they die. I think they change over time. I think they can change, but I don't think that people who are negative and do negative things suddenly have some kind of change of heart, change of mind, and when they pass on, that they become nice and they say, hey, wow, I did all of these things wrong, and I'm not going to do it anymore. I don't think that's true. I think given the opportunity that some people who have passed on would like to continue to create havoc in other people's lives. Sometimes these people are targeted individually, and sometimes it's quite random.
They never have any regrets, do they?
Some spirits change and some do not. The problem is that they're a sort of malcontent. We have people who are living on the earth, and they're bad. Most people are good and some are not, and most spirits are good and some are not. And spirits have no reason to change. Even though we can see ourselves better, we still, have to go through a process of looking at ourselves and determining the things that we did wrong and right in the physical world. And some people just aren't capable of that, and some people are just plain bad.
Is there a difference between a negative spirit and a demonic spirit?
A demonic spirit may never have lived on the planet Earth.
Aha.
a wholly different kind of creature, George. So we're talking about something that is very powerful, and they transmit anger, they transmit hatred, which are feelings, and those feelings can activate inside of ourselves and activate our own feelings, our own angers, and greatly put them out of proportion and get us to do things that we would not normally do. And demonic spirits have even been known to alter physical reality and to change and move things in the physical world. And I've seen it many times in my work.
Now, is there a problem with getting rid of a demonic spirit with what you do as opposed to a negative spirit, which is what you do a lot of?
Negative spirits are just people who are dead, and so if we protect ourselves properly, and I've spent a great amount of time learning and teaching people how to quickly protect themselves, we can fend these creatures off. Now, essentially, these creatures are just us without a physical body, but they still have a mind and they still have a personality, and we can fend them off with a little bit of knowledge and help. But most people really don't study these things, and they don't know how to do it. And the problem is that they end up getting battered by outside forces. And when people think about us, they actually create a connection of emotional energy. Even when people are thinking about us in a good way, they are still creating an emotional connection. When they're thinking about us in a negative way, that negative connection can actually get us to do things and feel differently than we would normally not feel.
What techniques, Jeffrey, do you use to try to stop or get rid of these evil spirits?
I teach people a natural technique that brings energy up from the non-physical universe, and that energy has an effect upon all negative emotional energy. So essentially, this is about shaping energy, taking raw energy from the other side, which is non-physical science, not physical science, but non-physical science, taking this energy and shaping it in order to make it do things that we want it to do. So essentially, we're taking and shaping energy in order to break up negative emotional energy.
That's pretty shocking for a lot of people.
It's shocking, but it works.
Does the individual who's being attacked need to believe that they can get rid of it, or
No.
do they rely on you?
It's a good question, George. They don't need to rely on me, and they don't need to rely on any kind of belief system, because I have always believed in all of my studies and my experiences that there are two sides to reality, at least. There's the physical and the non-physical. And the non-physical reality, the non-physical side of the universe, essentially, has its own set of scientific principles that are not written down like our laws might be. It's closer to something like gravity. And we can take and use these energies in order to have an effect upon negative spirits, negative energies, and also negative people at work and other places that are causing problems for us.
And that's probably more than ever before as well, right? Negative people?
Not only are work environments probably less happier than they've ever been, George, but if you go into any large store, they used to be like fun places, and now people are very worried about prices. They're worried about maybe diseases or something, and no, it's not a lot of fun. People are not getting together like they used to. They're afraid of each other for a lot of reasons. We're separated for a lot of reasons, and that's causing a huge amount of emotional energy to be generated by ourselves, and negative spirits are taking advantage of that.
We're going to come back in just a moment with Jeffrey Seelman. His latest book is called Moving Energy, which we'll talk about. His website is called starclear.com, linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with Jeffrey Seelman. Jeffrey, what do these demonic forces want in evil spirits? What do they want with an individual?
I would like to tell you that there is some kind of master plan, George, but when it comes to evil spirits, demonic spirits, and other kinds of negative creatures, that very often they just have their own motivations. It's ego. They like to see people's lives fall apart. They like to see families fall apart. They like to see the workplace fail and businesses fail. And there's not always some kind of revenge or some kind of, like I said, motivation for doing so. It's just the idea that, hey, I can do it. I can make it happen. And that sounds crazy to us. That doesn't sound to a normal person. People listening out there, that why would they do something like that? Well, why would criminals do the horrible things that they do?
Right.
I very often call demonic spirits and negative spirits, people who are just dead and continue to do negative things, criminal spirits. I call them criminal spirits because that's the kind of spirits they are. They do things that are outside of the natural law.
Now, you're an exorcist. How did you become one? Why did you become one?
I am an exorcist. It almost happened by accident. I was working with a group that was doing some exploring of houses and that kind of thing, and a couple of these people were writers and a couple of them were psychics. Two of these people had problems in their homes, and they were unable to get rid of them. It wasn't some kind of horrible haunting, but they felt that they were not alone, and these were two different people with two different problems. And I just simply gave it a whack, and it worked. Essentially, I went in there, and I got rid of the problem. And the people said, you know, that is incredible that you can do something like that. They were very sensible people. They had tried for years to get rid of it, and they said, why don't you take this to the public? And I did. About maybe 7 years later, 1997, I was approached telepathically by several spirits, and they wanted to know if I wanted to join a group of exorcists, spirits that were out there, a group of spirits, large group of spirits, to try to help living people and also other spirits, as well as aliens who are in need, who need help when they're being attacked by other spirits, when they're being attacked by people, by aliens or anything like that. It's a group that is banded together, a very large, powerful group, and they wanted to know if I would like to be a part of that. They gave me 3 days to think about it. They said, really, Jeffrey, you can't get out of this. You really want to spend your whole life doing this. You don't want to spend, a couple of years or something like that. And I did think about it, George, and I made a decision that I was going to do it. I was born with psychic ability. I had all sorts of strange things happening to me, like alien visitations and things like that when I was young. And so I thought, well, why not help people? My background was in technology. I was in the service. But I thought, why not do something that you can do for other people? And so I did that. And when I made that decision, some really interesting things happened to me on a metaphysical level, and my talents increased, which are really just about helping people.
And there's probably no question that these negative spirits and demonic forces are having a field day right about now.
It's amazing, the amount of calls that I get, emails and Skype and Zoom, all of that, more than ever, George. People are really worried about their own families,
sure,
their loved ones, the changes they're going through, the anger that is growing in our society, the anger that is growing around our world. I don't see it getting any better right now. And I've been very concerned about it for a long time. What happens when we let our anger go and we don't pay attention to forces that may be around us that we can't see with our naked physical eyes, but are there anyways, and that they're trying to put their rage, generate their rage and anger and their feelings, and we pick that up kind of like a road rage. Everybody knows what road rage is. You know, when somebody cuts us off, we, kind of turn into these very temporary mad killers. And so they do the same thing. Negative spirits try to amplify our feelings. If we're angry about something, we're having an argument with somebody, or something that happened at work or something like that, and they try to get our rage amplified by coming close to us and generating a huge amount of emotional feeling. And that locks into our feelings. We don't even know what's happening. And that amplifies all of the feelings and throws us over the edge. And that gets us to do things that we would not normally do. Hurt somebody or think about hurting ourselves, all the crazy stuff that's going around in the world. And I'm not saying that all of the bad things that are happening are being done or caused by negative spirits. They're not. We are responsible for our own actions.
Sure.
But we have to be aware, for those out there listening to this show, interesting people just like me who really want to know what's happening out there, all the secrets behind what we normally see. We have to understand that they really are out there. There are things happening out there, and that we can't see them with our physical eyes, but there are lots of different kinds of beings out there, and also lots of negative energies and positive energies. And negative energies can be generated and are generated by people. They tend to remain in our living and working environments and also in our body's energy fields. And we need to get that stuff out. And one of the things that I do is I get it out of people, and I also teach people the things that they can do to get it out of themselves.
Can one person control a demonic spirit, Jeffrey?
No, and it's a good question, because one of the myths out there is that any person can control any spirit. Spirits have nothing, of interest in anything that we do. We can't give them money. They don't need money. They don't need gold. They don't need cars or luxury items. And so they're not going to listen to human beings, not people who are dead and doing negative things, and certainly not demonic spirits. They're not going to listen to us. So there are people out there. I have certainly worked with, dozens of people who think that they can control demonic spirits for their own purposes, and they end up being controlled.
Interesting.
Very quickly, too. I mean, it doesn't take long for something like a demonic spirit to get over emotionally on a living human being.
Your new book is called Moving Energy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Moving Energy is my third book. I wanted to create a book that was something about the times that we are going through right now, all the angers that people have towards each other, and also some things we can do about it. Half the book is dedicated to what is going wrong with our world, and half the book is dedicated to what we can do about it, what practical steps that anybody can take to protect ourselves from negative people or people that are good and just generating negative energy, say they're feeling negative, and also negative spirits and demonic spirits as well. It also goes into keeping our home and our workplace free from excess emotional energies. So it's kind of a workbook and also something about what's happening in today's world.
You've got exercises in the book for people. Give us a few.
Sure. One of them I have, it's a new one, and it's all about creating a force field around yourself very fast. I call it the tornado. And what you do is you simply visualize an amount of energy coming through your body's energy fields from the other side, because each of us has our spirit and also our physical body, two different things. So this energy is coming up through our spirit, and see this energy coming around you, floating around you, and start to spin it. Start to spin it very, very fast. The faster you spin it, without any kind of excess emotion or any kind of putting too much energy into, too much thought. Make it easy on yourself, but spin this energy around you fast enough, and you'll see that no one else's energy that is negative will be able to get through. You're shaping the energy by giving it a command, and the command is that you're creating this energy, you're shaping this energy to protect yourself against negative energy. And you can use any words you want. It's not an incantation, it's not a spell. It's about shaping energy and bringing energy up from the other side through you, around you, and spinning it so that negative energy bounces off each and every one of us.
What would you say causes a human being to become negative? Are they born that way? Are they developed? What happens?
There's the idea of original sin, which is in some of our major religions, George, but I do think that what they're really talking about is past life issues, and some people have had negative past lives. Some people are born and they already have an attitude. Some people don't deal with adversity very well, and so they get angry, and some people are abused, and they know nothing else besides not being loved and being angry. There's a lot of reasons why people are angry, but we're not taught to release it. We're not taught how to release negative energy. We're not even taught that it actually exists.
We keep it pent up, don't we?
We do. We're taught to do that, to hold it in. We hold it in our entire lives, and there's no reason for it. And all it does is create blockages to success and blockages to happiness.
Jeffrey, we're going to take a break and come back and take phone calls with you next on Coast to Coast AM. The lines are open. Questions for Jeffrey? Maybe you could share a story of demonic or negative spirits and energy. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. This hour, we'll take your phone calls with Jeffrey Seelman as we talk about negative forces and demonic spirits right here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. Jeffrey Seelman with us. George Norrie here. His latest book is called Moving Energy. Then, how long did you contemplate writing that book, Jeffrey?
Actually, it was years, George. I wasn't sure if I wanted to put some of those exercises in there. I've been practicing them myself for quite a long time, for decades actually. But they're potent. They're powerful. They're ways that the average person who does not have to be psychic can actually help themselves keep away from negative energy, negative spirits, and keep those things out of your home.
And out of your home you want to do, that's for sure, right?
Yeah.
Have people been hurt by these things?
All the time. I mentioned before the demonic spirits, when the wind is right, and what I mean by that is that there's a good amount of emotional energy in the atmosphere they can actually move physical objects to some degree. I myself have been attacked successfully several times, not during exorcisms or clearings of any kind, as I call it, but when my back is turned. And that's usually when they attack, George, when we get weak, when when
the guard is
too much
down,
or do too much drugs or something, not drug use, but drug abuse, alcohol abuse. Something can, step in when we step out. Lots of things can happen when we don't pay attention to what's happening around us.
Are they constantly, Jeffrey, on the prowl for victims like that?
Yes, and one of the myths is that negative spirits hang around one person's home and live in their homes. It's really not true. I find that negative spirits of different kinds actually move from one house to another house on any given night or daytime and actually try to cause as much trouble with as many different people, with as many different families as possible. So they move around and spend 5 or 10 minutes scaring the you-know-what out of people, and children as well, and then they move on and do it to someone else.
Have you ever seen a young kid be negative?
One of the things that I see is negative, yes, but under attack is more likely, George. I noticed that negative spirits have no problems attacking children. Anything to get a rise out of any human being, anything to get that emotional fix that the spirit is looking for, and so they have no problems attacking children in their cradles.
It's probably easier for them, too, isn't it?
It is, and children are naturally psychic. We all are psychic. Its psychic ability is just perception and nothing more. And so children are very psychic naturally. They just came from that realm, and so they very often see what they're afraid of, not only feel something negative around them, but actually can see it, whereas we normally just feel something negative around us. But we all have stories of feeling something negative and also being in negative environments that don't feel right to us. And we could be picking up on emotional energy that's just free-floating, just energy. We could be picking up on some kind of spirit that might be in there.
Let's go to the phones. First-time caller Ryan is with us in Oklahoma. Ryan, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Well, let's put it this way. Ever since I got on my knees before God in 2012, I've been getting attacked by spirits almost 24/7.
Jeez.
And it's mainly demonic stuff.
Can you fight it off, or are they coming at you?
Well, I can kind of fight them up, get them out. I cast them out, kind of like Jesus did, but they keep coming and they come back, and I'll be asleep. If I fall asleep, they come back when I'm sleeping and get inside of me.
What makes him a magnet for this, Jeffrey?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the cause is, but certainly something's not working. And so it's good that, you have, you're involved in a belief system and a religious system, because I do believe that these wonderful spirits exist and are in charge of the universe. Good is far stronger than the power of negative spirits and negativity itself. But you're doing something wrong, Ryan. And so we need to figure out what it is. Now, if I had to guess, because I am psychic and I'm just taking a quick look here, I think that your shields, your protective shields, are not up at all. They're not really functioning.
And what are
That
protective
you're an open book,
shields, Jeffrey? Jeffrey, tell us about these shields.
Essentially, we all have something called an aura, and the aura is a word we all have heard. But what that actually is an energy band that is on the outside of us. It surrounds our spirit. And what that does is it's supposed to protect us from emotional energy that is not good for us. It's kind of like a filtering system. It's not like a balloon. So that energy should be naturally flowing out from us Some people's energy are actually moving inwards, which is not good. It's kind of like a depression situation. Some people's energy are not moving at all. And so when they get attacked by a negative spirit or negative energy, and this could be also, Ryan, this could be negative energy that you're picking up on, and you're feeling a lot of negative energy. So I haven't really talked to you yet. Give me a call and talk to me. I'd be happy to talk to you. I don't charge for consultations. I say that every time I'm on the show, and it's just the way I am. I need to find out if I can help you anyway. But it could be loose emotional energy that is activating your system, and you're feeling lousy for 24 hours a day. That would be my guess, because you're probably not under attack by a spirit 24 hours a day.
And they can call you through your website?
Yes, they can. StarClear.com has got all of my contact information.
Very good. Next up, Cynthia is with us in Massachusetts. Welcome to the show. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi. I am a very positive person and a little bit psychic, but in helping others actually. But I find that I seem to be attacked in some way negatively when I least expect it. I try to be positive and positive imagery and stuff like that. And all I want to know is, how can I keep these forces away from me?
What are you generally doing when you get attacked?
I tend to start being negative to everyone without purpose, without intention. And then afterwards, I feel so self-blame, like, you did this, now you can't correct this. And I try to get back to my positive being, but I feel very down on myself.
Jeffrey, we'll let you take over. Go ahead.
I designed some systems over the past several decades that you can bring up, Cynthia, in 5 seconds that will keep these things away from you. Now, I'm assuming that it might be a spirit that is trying to get you to feel bad about yourself and to act out anger against other people. It could be something else. It could be emotional energy that is reacting with your emotional energy system. It could be internal emotional energy that you are generating, and somehow that is causing some issues. But the answer really is to generate energies, because when you generate protective fields, you're actually pushing out negative energy from your system. And that is kind of like doing a little bit of a mini clearing. And so it's very possible that, Cynthia, that something is on your tail. Something is trying to get to you, to get to other people, because what you're describing, 1 minute you're feeling okay, and then you're not feeling okay, and you're angry at people, and then you feel guilty about all of that. It could be that kind of a problem, and I would recommend some kind of clearing exercise that I do, and also some protection exercises. They're free. They're easy to learn, and they're easy to do, and you don't have to be psychic.
Why do these exercises seem to work, Jeffrey?
It's science itself. When we shape energy that is on the other side, it's kind of like this raw energy. If any of you remember Play-Doh out there, I'm 63, so I certainly do. And so essentially we're shaping raw energy from the other side in order to have an effect upon energies that are also non-physical. So we're shaping non-physical energies to have an effect upon other non-physical energies. Spirits are non-physical energies. Emotions are non-physical energies. Anything psychological are non-physical energies. Most of everything are non-physical energies. Just our physical body and the physical world are really not non-physical. They're physical in nature, but they're still connected with the non-physical world.
Next up, let's go to Timmy in Florida. Welcome to the show. Hello, Timmy.
Hey, guys. Nice to be on the show. A couple New Years ago, I stayed over at a friend of mine's house, and I slept on the couch. He was in the bedroom. He came out at like 2:30 in the morning and said, I was sitting up on the couch with a violet purple haze and like these electricity bolts around my head. And I had dark shark eyes, and he asked if I was okay. I didn't answer him, but I didn't realize it. He told me that in the morning. I don't know what that would be.
What is that, Jeffrey?
Well, you know that we tend to see as much as we can see, Timothy. And so we don't always see a spirit or whatever kind of life form, and I think there are many different kinds of life forms out there. We're just talking about a couple of them tonight. We don't always see them for what they really are. We only see as far as our perceptual levels will allow us. So when I see a spirit, and I was born with psychic ability, when I see a spirit, I see a complete person. Whatever that person might want to look like, and the spirit can change their form and look like anything they want to look like, and that's one thing they can do. And they can also look really scary, so they know what scares us, and that can frighten us. And also, we might be getting a partial glimpse of them, Timothy, meaning that what your friend saw or what you saw in that bedroom might be only a part of what actually is there. So you might see some colors and some things spinning around, but in actuality, if you could see the whole thing, you might see essentially what looks like a person, a spirit.
How often, Jeffrey, do these demons walk in on someone's body?
It's really hard to do, George. It's not easy at all for a spirit to control another human being. Essentially, what you have there is two souls inside of one body. That is a very difficult thing to do. It does happen. It's called full possession, and it does happen, but it's not the normal way that spirits attack. So a spirit can mix over time with a person to create like a full possession. But I know that I get phone calls every day about these kind of things. I'm possessed, Jeffrey. But I tell them in all seriousness, George, that if they were truly 100% possessed, they would not call me.
Who would they call?
They wouldn't call an exorcist.
A Ghostbuster.
They would call the gun shop. Think about it now, because if they were possessed by a demonic spirit, and demonic spirit wanted to create as much havoc as possible, they would not call somebody like me who could do something about it. They would call, some place to get a hold of a weapon, make some kind of threatening phone call, some kind of self-harm type of thing. This is one, and I'm being very serious about this. This is one of the ways that I gauge people when they call and they tell me that I'm completely possessed, and I say, no, I don't think so. Maybe you're under attack. Now, a spirit can attack a human without even touching our energy fields. All it really has to do is throw a huge amount of emotional energy our way, like rage and anger, and that can touch our energy fields. If our energy fields are not protected properly, and most of our energy fields are not, George, then that can mix with it and create sort of a road rage effect and amplify our angers and rages out of proportion and get us to do all sorts of crazy things.
Let's go west of the Rockies. Lawrence is with us in Pasadena, California. Hello, Lawrence. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
I feel like I've been experiencing with my partner. She's actually a Lyme disease person.
Recipient.
She's been kind of struggling with it, and she's just been acting really like, I don't know, like like always argumentative. I don't know if something's going on. There's like a lot of like weird signs, and I felt drafts, like waking up to a draft, and there's been times where she's like, she'll be like staring at me in the middle of the night, So I'm really trying to figure out what's going on. Constantly wanting to argue, kind of like poking the bear, and I have to do the gray rock method, and it's becoming frustrating, But I feel like it's a challenge every single day. It's always like an argument.
Do you think the Lyme disease has anything to do with it?
Honestly, I don't know.
Jeffrey, what about disease?
Yeah, Lyme disease, of course, is a physical illness, and it could have something to do with some symptoms that she's having. But the first thing that popped in my mind, Lawrence, when you had mentioned that was possibly the living environment. Now, I don't know if this is, after 10 seconds. But the idea is that I'm kind of wondering whether or not there's, some kind of emotional energy in the home, the living environment, that she might be reacting to. It may not be something to do with her personally. Lyme disease wouldn't attract spirits.
Right.
We know that. It doesn't attract spirits.
Diseases generally don't, right?
No, they don't. You're right. And that wouldn't be the cause of something like that. Sometimes when we become weaker because of illnesses and diseases, it can leave us more open for attack. But my first thought would be possibly something to do with the home. I would probably need to speak with you further and see if this is just generally coming from her, or if everyone's getting maybe some uncomfortable feelings from the environment, and that might be triggering some of this. That doesn't mean that there isn't a spirit in the house and that it may be attacking someone.
We're going to come back and take final calls with Jeffrey Seelman in just a moment, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Next hour, we're going live to the United Kingdom to talk about ghosts, UFOs, and the Loch Ness Monster, so make sure you're part of the program. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with our final segment with Jeffrey Seelman. The name of his new book is called Moving Energy, just came out. His website, starclear.com. Have you ever been physically hurt, Jeffrey, by any of these entities?
I have. Simple stuff. One time I was getting dressed in my office, and my girlfriend was sleeping in the bedroom, so I went into my office to get ready for the day.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I quickly felt somebody behind me. I looked right behind me, and I saw a man standing there, and he shot a lightning bolt, kind of a laser beam type thing, and it hit my back, and it ended up putting my back out. I had to go to the hospital, drive over to the hospital, and get some muscle relaxants, and that was the extent of that. One more time, very quickly, I was speaking at an overnight haunted house event. Probably should have been doing that. People like me are supposed to be clearing them, not talking about it so much. But I was talking to some Ghostbusters who were there over the weekend, and they'd given me a room, and I had woken up that morning, and there was a creature floating above me, about 4 feet, floating directly above my body, and it was singing a very horrible lullaby to me. Before I could do anything about it, and I have things I can do, it quickly just flew right back into the wall within a matter of a couple of seconds. And I was not really doing so well, George, for a couple of days after that. And I made a decision that I would not, if I went into a haunted house again, that I would simply, it would be for clearing purposes, for exorcisms, not for giving speeches and sleeping over and this kind of thing. And also they were serving alcohol. I was not, but they had alcohol for the Ghostbusters, which is not a good idea. And and anybody who does ghostbusting in the UK knows that it's practically illegal. It's a terrible idea. But they had an open bar, and just things were flying around left and right, and so that was just two of the times.
Got to be careful. Let's go to Charlie in Austin, Texas, to get this segment going. Hello, Charlie.
Hello there. How you doing, George and Jeff?
I'm okay. What can we do for you?
Oh yeah, I had like three real quick questions. You want me to, George? You want me to say them all right?
Let's go. Let's go one at a time.
Okay. Okay. So the first one is how many percentage of inmates are attached or attacked by spirits?
Are you saying inmates, prison inmates?
Yeah.
It can happen. That people that are not feeling good about themselves can attract negative emotional energy, negative feelings. They can generate negative energy. Prisons are also notorious because they are very, very sad places.
Yeah.
Even if the people deserve it, that can attract negative energy, generate negative energy, and even attract negative spirits.
Okay, my next question is how many spirit attacks happen to the average person in a year?
I would say probably none. I don't think the average person necessarily is attacked by a spirit, like say once a year or twice a year or something like that. It may be something that happens once or twice or a few times in a person's life. It may be of a small consequence, and it may be something that is life-changing.
I agree with that.
Okay, and my last one, I just wanted you to actually talk about thoughts and how many spirits make our thoughts negative.
How many spirits make a what negative?
Thoughts.
Yeah, thoughts.
Make
thoughts.
Jeffrey? Thoughts.
Spots.
Thoughts.
Bots? I didn't catch that.
Can you hear me, Jeff?
I did. I just didn't hear that last word.
He said, how many spirits make our thoughts negative?
Oh, how many spirits? Oh, that's okay. Now I understand the question. We can make our own thoughts negative. Spirits just amplify these things. It's really not their fault. Okay, there are things we can do to protect ourselves. God gave us 2 legs so we can walk to the store, and a mind so we can think. And so we do have the ability to protect ourselves. And so it doesn't take a lot of spirits in order to change a person's mind. Sometimes people hear from disreputable psychics that there are 10 or 20 spirits inside of a person. Nonsense. There might be a spirit attacking a person or trying to influence a person, but it only takes one spirit or one negative person to influence us. Even negative people can influence us. So it only takes really one spirit, not a group of spirits. And usually spirits that are negative do not hang around each other for ego reasons. They don't like each other. And so they like to do things by themselves. They're not group-oriented.
Next
They're not
up,
team players.
Let's go to James in Virginia. James, take it away.
Hi, George and Jeff. How are you?
Good, Jim.
Hi,
Good.
James.
I want to quickly mention my book because this is timing of the world right now. Blessed with an Angel and a Rainbow, and it has to do with the end days, and it has a lot to do with learning to put your armor of God on, because we're in a spiritual battle, as you guys know, and this spiritual battle is occurring in Revelation 12. We already had the celestial event of the woman, the child, and the dragon. It took place September 23rd, 2017. 1/3 of the stars were cast down, where we tried to overtake heaven. Those were the angels that were failed with Satan, and they were cast down to the earth, made into apparently demons from every minister or anybody I ever saw or anything on the internet, and follow Satan's commands. So we're under all this influence right now. And, sir, Jeff, I hate to be so against your book, but if you don't mention Christ as and the Holy Spirit in people that keeps out the evil spirits and the demons,
I think it's very important to have higher powers, and we all have different belief systems in order to help us. And yes, they will help us defend ourselves. I was talking about the idea that we also have to help ourselves defend ourselves against negative spirits. I really believe that we're not in the end times. I think that we can win this battle. Okay, there are a lot of negative things out there that are against us right now, the biggest one being ourselves. Okay, we're our own worst enemy, not demonic spirits or evil spirits. Oh, yes, they are there, and there are other kinds of creatures as well. But it's how we treat each other that is really sinking us right now, and it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be the end times. We can win this battle, and we can go on and do some wonderful things.
Do religious or spiritual people tend to not be possessed or hit by these spirits?
It's a good question, George. I think that it's very important for people to have some kind of belief system. I think it makes people stronger. I think that those spirits that they believe in are actually really out there, and they are willing to help us and protect us as long as we are able and willing to do some things for ourselves.
Let's go to Joe in Monterey, California. Joseph, go ahead.
Thank you, George, for taking my call.
Sure.
Jeffrey, now you've been at this for a long time, and I'm sure that you ran across some difficulties dealing with the other side because they're tricksters and they lie and they're lots of imposters. What do you think about extraterrestrials being channeled by people, and they think that they're positive, but they're really not, and they're, giving us bad information? And also, what do you do? How do you protect yourself, or how does a person protect themselves from armies from a race of extraterrestrials? Because my friend is under extreme psychic attack.
Well, I do believe, and I brought this up in earlier shows, we've talked about this, that I believe that the universe is teeming with life, full of life.
Yep,
there are aliens everywhere. They're out there, and there are many, many, many planets, like the Earth, and aliens are just everywhere, and they just have better technology, the ones that are able to travel, and so some of them are not good. Most of them are, just like people. Most of them are good, and some of them are not, so they can be problematic. Your second question was...
the first one was about tricksters.
Tricksters, yeah. Negative spirits are pathological liars, and you're not going to get any kind of useful information out of them. Many years ago, psychics used to ask me, why don't you do something to help the spirits that you are kicking out of people's homes, businesses, and also their bodies? And I said, I am not a spirit psychologist. It's not my job. They need help, and they can get help on the other side from spirits.
I'm not sure they'd listen to a human anyway.
I think it's very important not to listen to negative spirits, and also when doing any kind of spirit communication, which is actually very dangerous, and it has to be done very carefully. I don't recommend it. We talked about this before as well. That essentially that to take things with a grain of salt, meaning that if it doesn't feel right, question it. If it's some kind of information about the future, maybe, possibly. I'd be very careful, when talking with spirits. And so, yes, they are. But most spirits are good, and they don't lie to people. There are spirits that come down here and they give us good advice. They give us intuition. They give us business concepts and tell us they love us and we're going to see them someday. All these things really happen. These are good spirits. But negative spirits, and sometimes we don't know who is who, we have to be careful when speaking with spirits of like believing everything that they say, because that is not what's going on.
Next up, Cornelius is with us in Alexandria, Louisiana. Hello there, sir.
Hey, Jeff and George. I'm called the God Guns of Gold man, Jeff, the Bible Bullets and Beans man. I live down here where there's voodoo, hoodoo, and you-do. in Louisiana. And I don't know if you saw this, Jeff, but I do believe we're in the end times, but we ain't going to argue about that. In Ashbury University in Wilford, Kentucky, they're having a big spiritual awakening. They have 24-hour church service. People from all over the world are coming to Ashbury University and stuff. And I don't know if you heard about it, but like I said,
the only thing I would say, and of course, we aren't. It's not an argument, Cornelius. All I'm trying to say is I just don't believe that it has to be the end times. There's such a thing as self-fulfilling prophecy. We can make it happen if we don't take care of our planet and take care of ourselves and take care of each other. But it doesn't have to be the end times. We don't have to go along with that just because a book says that it's the end times or something. We could be misinterpreting that. I think the human race has got a lot of future ahead of us and a lot of places to visit, a lot of planets to go to, and things to do. And so that's kind of where my head is at when it comes to the end times thing is I feel like I have to say something because I simply feel that is a self-fulfilling prophecy and it's not necessary that we go along with that.
Jeffrey, where do people get your book, Moving Energy?
You can get it from my website. Exclusively right now on my website is Moving Energy and my other books as well. And it's right there. There's a big old link that says instant downloads, and you can have it right away.
We started this by saying we're under attack with all kinds of negative forces. Do you see things getting better or worse?
I think they're going to get worse for a while.
Oh, boy.
I'm probably not going to see them getting better in my life, being 63, but I do think that we're going to be very tired and really sick of all this negativity towards each other. And that's what's really going on. And I think also there's a lot of things to discover on a metaphysical level around us, everything from aliens to spirits to all the mystical, magical things that are happening around us. And I think that's going to bring us together.
All right, my friend. Thank you, Jeffrey. Stay in touch. Up next, we're going live to the United Kingdom to talk about some paranormal things. Up next, Malcolm Robinson back with us after 13 years. We are going live to the United Kingdom to talk about UFOs, ghosts, and the Loch Ness Monster on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Malcolm Robinson back with us, has been interested in the strange world of the paranormal for as long as he can remember. And back in 1979, he formed his own research society called the Strange Phenomena Investigations Group, currently the assistant editor at Outer Limits magazine. Malcolm is an established speaker, presenter, scriptwriter, author. A number of his books. We'll go through some of them in a moment. His goal in life is to continue researching cases pertaining to the strange world of UFOs and the paranormal, and he has done that in a big way, and to hopefully provide some answers to account for what at present eludes us. Malcolm, welcome back. It's been a long time.
It has indeed, George. It's fantastic to be back on your show, and a very good day to your good self and all your listeners.
You too, my friend. How did you get involved in the paranormal?
Well, I've always been interested in all things to do with the weird and the wonderful. And ever since I was a small boy growing up in Scotland, I had this deep-held fascination. But I remember my parents taking us on holiday, and we went to fun fairs where you had the traditional ghost train, and I went in that, and I was fascinated by all these things jumping out of you, and it kind of stayed with me as I grew older. And as I went through my teenage years, I started to read the books of Charles Fort, Erich von Daniken, Jenny Randalls, Jacques Vallée, and of course at that time in Scotland as well, we had a number of American TV shows, the nature of which the Outer Limits, the Twilight Zone.
Oh, yeah.
I started to get immersed in The Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the Worlds, Forbidden Planet, and of course Star Trek. So it was like a kind of grooming, this fascination. Having said that, George, I honestly believed at that time that there were no validity to UFOs, the ghosts and poltergeists. I honestly felt back in, my early days that there were no truth to these matters. How wrong was I? Because as I've now progressed through my life, I've soon found out that there's no smoke without fire. Yes, there's a lot of charlatans out there. Yes, there's a lot of people out to pull the wool over your eyes. But once you get rid of that, George, you know as well as I do that there's something there, something worthy to study. And that's what I've been doing all my life now, is just looking at these things very, very closely. I've embroiled myself in some incredible Scottish UFO cases, which I dare say will showcase shortly. But yeah, it's been a wonderful journey. It really has.
Yeah, I want to talk with you tonight about UFOs, ghosts, and the Loch Ness Monster. But have you been following the story out here, Malcolm, about these strange objects that our military has shot down?
Yes, it's making a lot of big press here as well, here in the United Kingdom. And everybody's got their own take on that. Obviously the first one, as we know, was indeed a spy balloon of some description, possibly Chinese. The other three objects is quite interesting. It would appear that there's something going on. I'll be honest with you, George. I don't think it's nothing extraterrestrial. I do believe it's maybe another government, someone out to test the resources of NORAD, of airspace. But that's just a speculation on my part. Could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I don't think these are extraterrestrial. They call them unidentified because that's what they are, but I think they're from Earth.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And I dare say as the weeks progress, we may learn some more information about these intrusions. And what I would personally like to see is the debris field. I would like to see the debris field from these other three shoot-downs. That would be interesting.
Absolutely. You wrote a book last year about the Falkland Hill UFO incident, Scotland's most controversial UFO case. Tell us about this.
Well, yes, absolutely. It is indeed one of Scotland's biggest controversial cases for a whole range of reasons. It's way above the norm of any given normal UFO sighting, which I'll explain to yourself and your listeners shortly. But it all started on the evening of September 23rd, 1996. And the story goes that a family in the south part of Scotland. Now, this area is devoid of any large, houses. It's farmland. And they had run out of coffee. So they said, let's jump in the car and let's move to the nearest village, a small village called Fruki, to buy a jar of coffee. So they got out their farmhouse. That was Mary Morrison, accompanied with her son David, and also her friend Jane. And as they drove along this peaceful, tranquil road with these fields on either side, it was about 8 o'clock in the evening. It was quite dark. Suddenly they became aware of a large, black, triangular-shaped craft hovering, partly on a farmer's field and partly on the road surface. It's probably around about 200-300 yards in front of the car. They stopped the car and they knew straight away that this was a conventional aircraft. This was not a conventional copter aircraft of any description. They've never seen the likes of this in their life. So they stopped the car and then they observed that underneath this triangular object was two large columns of spiral light descending from beneath the object and hitting the road surface in a spiral dance. So Mary jumped back in the car. She flashed the car's headlights at this object and the object turned these lights up from this towards the car. And at that point, the object just screamed off into the sky and was gone. And, like anybody in a close proximity UFO case, it really unnerved them, but it also excited them as well. So they went to the shop, they bought the jar of coffee, and on the way back, the same or similar object came very quickly from a distance towards their car, rushing over their car. The young son David, he was only 10 of age in the back seat, was crying, uncontrollably crying, thinking that his life was about to end, that this mysterious object was going to crash into the car. So what happened next was they went back to the farmhouse, and Mary, who was in the car, said to her daughter, Susan, you'll never believe what we've just seen out there tonight. What? So Susan refused to believe her mother. She says, oh, there are no such things, as you know. Such things. And Mary, her mother, said, look, come in the car. Maybe it's still there. Let's go back out into the night. So they went into the car. So they travelled down towards this big area, and it was forestry. It was a lot of forest. And they saw these red, green, and blue lights coming up from the forest floor through the canopy of trees and into the sky. Now, these people have lived in this area for many, many years, George. They know the area. They've never seen the likes of this before. What could this be? They said to me that it resembled those searchlights during the Second World War in London, where they had these searchlights illuminating the belly of the German bombers. Well, it was like searchlights coming up. So they drove to this area. They were about less than a quarter of a mile from these trees. And she says, Malcolm, above us, about 2,000-3,000 feet above us, was like stars. They weren't stars. They were hanging motionless above our heads, about 2,000 feet above our heads. They're all twinkling. It was majestic. It was beautiful. Then there was an area called the Falkland Hill, a large, large hill. And above that sat a very large orange ball-shaped object, which was kind of sparkling. It was like electrostatic. It was fuzzy. It was making noises. And then, as if the scene couldn't get any more stranger, it did. Because what then happened was there was this tremendous blue light pervaded the whole of the front of the trees at the forest. And she says, Malcolm, in front of this light was not one, it was not 10, it was not 20, it was not 50. She said there were hundreds. This is why it's controversial, partly. There were hundreds of these small grey beings. They were bending down onto the forest floor. They were lifting up boxes and cylinders, and they were taking them towards a larger structure object, nestling in the woods. And they were busy doing this. To the left and to the right of this amazing scene was larger entities, maybe about 7-8 feet tall, still grey, small, childlike bodies, if you like, the pear-shaped head, the black, inky, almond-shaped eyes.
The alien greys, right?
Correct, sir, yes, absolutely. And there was also this white, fuzzy ball, about the size of a basketball, just bouncing on the forest floor as well. Now, they're trying to take all this in. This is totally out with their normal perception of what normality should be. They couldn't believe it. And then, as if it couldn't get any weirder, it did, because what happened next was that a couple of these creatures suddenly materialized in these like soap bubbles. If you can imagine just a normal soap bubble, it's only about a couple of inches. But imagine it was 7 to 8 feet tall. Soap-like bubble, like two of these grey creatures inside it, and they were moving gently across this farmer's field towards where their car was parked. That was it. They had had enough. No, we just can't control this. This is crazy. So they jumped back into the car. And as they all got back in the car, that was the two ladies, the daughter and the son, suddenly this Susan, who refused to believe it when her mother came back to the farmhouse, she screamed out. She screamed out and says, Mom, there's something outside the car looking in. She described it as a small grey being peering in the car. And at that point, the car just sped off and screamed off into the distance. But before...
They were invaded by these things, huh?
Absolutely, yes. Now, before they left, The whole area was illuminated in a terrific blue blinding flash. It pervaded the whole car, it pervaded the whole area, and they screamed off into the night and they were gone. Now, that night and subsequent nights thereafter, George, the house was bombarded by these triangular-shaped craft. There were strange creatures that was seen, and they just couldn't comprehend what was going on there. You know, they really just couldn't understand what was going on. They also found bruises and scoop-like marks on their body that previously were not there. They suddenly just came up. Bamboozled them as well, yeah.
And they don't remember how they got them?
They don't, absolutely not. And when we were in the family's home interviewing Mary Morrison and her son, the little David says, Mr. Robinson, why don't you ask the aliens why you're here? What do you mean? And he turned around and he pointed to the living room window. He says, there's 3 of them standing there at the window.
Oh, my gosh.
So myself and my colleagues slowly turned round with our cameras in expectation of fingers crossed. Surely they may well be there. This is it. This is what we want. We turned round and we saw nothing.
Oh.
So
that would have been an incredible video if you were able to have captured that.
Oh, yes, it would have been. And I looked at his mother, and I was maybe looking to see if she was embarrassed at her son saying this. And I said to Mary, can you see anything? And she went, yes. What do you see, Mary? She says, Malcolm, I see like a shimmering, like a heat haze on a summer's day on the road, the heat haze you get above the road. I see this, and I know, Malcolm, that if I concentrate, I will see the small grey beings coming through, and I don't want to see it. And so, yeah, it was very bizarre.
Now, also, while we have a few moments here before we talk about some ghosts and have a break here, the A-70 UFO incident. Now, what was that? You wrote a book on that, which was one of the first UFO abduction cases, wasn't it?
It was indeed, George. I mean, obviously, as we know, the whole world has had these abduction experiences from Canada, America to Brazil. But Scotland, at that point, had never really had what we could call an abduction experience, certainly a recorded one. All that changed on in August 1992, when 2 men, Gary Wood and Colin Wright, travelled from Edinburgh on an August evening, and their destination was a small village called Tabrax. Now, when you leave Edinburgh in the car, you leave the built-up city, the granite stone walls, the buildings, and the A70 eventually leads out into farmland. Total farm. Little house here, a reservoir, etc. And these men had no interest whatsoever in UFOs, like most people. And as we were driving down the road, Colin, who was in the passenger seat, said to Gary, what's that? What's that? And about 300 yards in front of the car, George, there was this 3-tiered black disc, shiny shaped object floating.
About how big? About
20 to 30 feet in width and about 15 to 20 feet in height. And it was just sitting there above the road. And again, they knew that this was not an aircraft or a helicopter. So the car went underneath this object. And as the car went underneath the object emitted a heavy, silver, shimmering curtain of mist, of sparkling like mist. It fell and hit the car. And as soon as that effect hit the car, George, both men were enveloped in total and inky blackness. They couldn't see their hand in front of their face.
Wow.
They couldn't see the dashboard of the car. They thought they were dead.
That's when they got abducted, isn't it?
Yeah, so they travelled to the witnesses, the person's home that they were going to. And the lady of the house says, what time do you call this? You're an hour and a half late. They could not believe it, George, because the journey should only have taken about 30, 35 minutes.
Yep, they lost time.
Absolutely, yeah. And that night and subsequent nights, they had strange dream imagery of these small grey creatures coming into their dream world. They found scars on their body, and they went, surely this is not one of those crazy UFO cases. But what if it is? Who do you go to? And that's when they found myself and their research group.
This reminds me of Rendlesham almost in the United Kingdom. Do you remember that case?
Very much so. I mean, I've spent many nights in Rendlesham Forest, and when it's really dark, it's dark. You cannot see the person standing next to you when you're in that forest. And, you know, it's an incredible tale, Rendlesham. It's one of the world's best, UFO cases for sure. Simply because we have Colonel Charles Hall and we have a number of American Air Force personnel and British servicemen who were there who allegedly saw this object in the woods as well. So, that was a big case, but certainly the 70 case is even more stranger. And that's when we decided to use the hypnosis as a tool on both witnesses to see if perhaps something else may have happened that night. And of course, it did. The story under hypnosis, very briefly, George, is both men were taken on board this object. They were stripped naked. They were subjected to some form of medical or clinical procedure. We hear this all the time coming from America and Canada, etc. And Gary, one of the witnesses, says, Malcolm, I was lying on this flat table. I had no control over my body. I couldn't move a muscle. I could only move my eyes.
Hold on for a second, Malcolm. We're at a break. We'll come back and finish that abduction story. Then we'll talk about ghosts in Scotland next. And our special guest tonight, Malcolm Robinson. We are going to go live with him next hour and take your phone calls. He is in Scotland. We'll talk a little bit about this abduction case. Then we'll get into some ghosts and the Loch Ness Monster as well. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Malcolm Robinson. Malcolm, let's let you finish up about this abduction case. So they found themselves in the ship on some kind of table or something?
Yeah, that's correct. Gary was lying on this table. He was completely immobilized. He couldn't move a muscle, and he could only move his eyes. And he says, Malcolm, I desperately wanted to lunge out at these small grey creatures, but I found that I couldn't. And then he said, then I looked down, and on the floor of this object was this naked female sitting on the floor. She had her knees just under her chin. She had her arms around her knees, and she slowly turned her head and looked towards me, and she had tears running down her face.
Oh my.
And she says, Malcolm, I'll always remember the despondency in this young girl on that ship, yeah.
Unbelievable. Let's talk a little bit about ghosts. Is the Scottish area in the United Kingdom heavy with ghost stories?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Scotland has a wonderful tradition of ghostly tales. And, of course, that's not just coming from its castles and beautiful castles. It's coming from stately homes. And, of course, even the council houses, just your normal Scottish houses. So, as a society, we've been investigating numerous cases across Scotland through, over the past 20, 30 years. And some of these cases are quite interesting. And it's just a joy to be part of that, George, yeah.
There are many different stories. I'm going to give you some titles. Tell me about, was it your father that saw his dead mother appear right in front of him?
Yeah, that's correct. As I was growing older, my father could see that my interests were lying towards the UFOs and the ghosts, etc. And he says, son, I'm going to tell you what happened to me a few years ago. He says, your granny, which is his mother, he says, as you know, she's passed on. She's moved to spirit. I says, yeah. He says, well, one night, after she had died, now she's been dead about a week, my father was lying in his bed. He was not sleeping. He had just went to bed, switched the light off, and then suddenly this beautiful white light pervaded the whole room, and he heard his name, Robert, look at me. And he knew straight away, George, that was his dead mother. What's going on here? And he pulled back the covers, he peered out from the covers, and she was beautiful. She was radiant. She was standing there in this beautiful aquamarine white light, and he said, the strange thing he says, she looked a lot younger. And that's what I've found out in my research when people move over to spirit. They don't always stay at the age where they passed over. They can go back to their 30s or 40s. And she said, son, I'm moving on now. I've got to go, but I will see you again. Now, I also learned from my dad's brothers, my uncles, that she also visited them that same night as well, saying her goodbyes. Now, some of your listeners may say, well, why does that not happen to me? That's a good question. There must be a mechanism where some people can see spirit very readily, whilst others can't. And I believe that the more psychic aware you are, the more psychic that individual is, you will see something. You could have 6 people in a haunted room and only 3 will see a spirit, and the other 3 are going, well, I can't see anything. So for me, I think the more attuned you are, then you will see something. And my dad clearly remembers it. He says, son, I was not dreaming. I saw that.
That's amazing. There's a poltergeist case in Scotland called the Souchie poltergeist case. What is that?
Yeah, well, actually transpired, I was only 3 years of age in 1960 when that actually transpired. However, I have re-researched it over the years. Very briefly, it's a big, big story, but very briefly, young Virginia Campbell came over from County Donegal in Ireland to Scotland in 1960. And no sooner had she arrived in a house in Scotland that there were bangings and thumpings happening all over the house. On one occasion, she ran downstairs, and it was like an old medicine ball from the 1960s, those big medicine balls you got in the gymnasium, thump, thump, thump down behind her. It got so bad that they actually had to get the local doctor in, the local GP, and he attended the family home, and he too heard and saw bangings. And he also said that he saw, when Virginia was in bed, she's only 11 years of age, the covers on her bed were rippling, as if you had a stone and you threw it into a quiet mill pond. You know, the concentric ripples you would get, George?
Yeah.
Well, that's what the bed covers were like. Then they got a priest came in because it got so bad. They got this priest came in, and he also said he saw these things as well. He said he also saw a linen chest. Back in 1960 in Scotland, we put covers and bed pillows on this big linen chest. That was tight against a wall. Then suddenly it screeched out about 18 inches across the linoleum floor, and then the lid of this chest of drawers thing just opened up, flap, 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 in full view of this minister, and nobody was there. And then it went back the way it came from. Now, as if things couldn't get any worse, they did, because when she went to school, the paranormal activity occurred there. And I'll give you a couple of, for instances. The teacher had given the class an essay to do, and all the young children were busy, heads over their work, their jotters, writing away apart from one little girl, Virginia. And the teacher saw that Virginia had her forearms and tried to push down on the desk lid. What are you doing? Stop that at once, Virginia. And as soon as Virginia lifted her arms off the school desk, the desk lid flapped up and down, Then a desk sitting next to Virginia that was unoccupied rose up a few inches off the floor, turned round and fell down again. On another occasion, Virginia went to the teacher's desk. And back in 1960, these were big, big desks, very sturdy wooden desks, George. And young Virginia placed her essay down on the teacher's table, at which point a long cane. Now, back in 1960, the school teachers used to use a cane to point to the blackboard. It was lying flat. It started to vibrate. Then it stood up vertically and thump down. And then the teacher, and I've interviewed the teacher, she says, Malcolm, at one point my stomach was in front of the long part of the desk, and then the desk rose up and swiveled round 90 degrees, and now my stomach is in the narrow part of the desk. Jeez. Now, as you can imagine, George, the whole classroom was in an uproar.
The kids were screaming. They were terrified. So the teacher ran to the door and she tried to open the door, but she says, Malcolm, the door wouldn't open. Oh. And she had to say, maybe it's a windy day, the door's jammed shut. She says, Malcolm, it felt like there was a large invisible man on the other side of this door, pulling it back as if not to let the children out of the classroom. But suddenly the door did open and all the classmates, tumbled out and went into the playground. And no matter where she went, even to a kind of safe house, an uncle's house in another town about 4 or 5 miles away, the events transpired as well. And it's probably one of Scotland's biggest poltergeist cases, the Socky poltergeist. And it was a wonderful case to get re-involved with, because I tracked down some of the classmates, and they're older now, of course, and they went, oh, yeah, we saw it all right, Malcolm. We saw what went on. And it's a shame, because skeptics and the skeptics will say, what a load of rubbish. And how I wish that the skeptics of the world had have been in that classroom and saw that, or have been in the house when things happened in the house as well. Her father's shaving brush came out of the toilet and came out into the hallway. The vacuum cleaner unplugged itself.
Jeez,
there was a whole range of things, George,
They'd become believers if they saw that, wouldn't they?
Well, I think so. I mean, we laughed at Marconi. That wouldn't work. We laughed at John Logie Baird, the invention of television. That wouldn't work. It did. We laughed at the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk, man's first flight. Oh, that will never fly. It did. There's so many people prepared to poke fun at UFOs and ghosts and poltergeists, but we're learning all the time. Mankind's on a big, big ladder of understanding, and we need to understand our place in the cosmos and what's round about us, because mysteries are there to be solved, and it's just great to be part of it.
Malcolm, who was the ghost of Bobby Smith?
Yeah, he was a gentleman who worked beside me at a local factory. We manufactured whiskey bottles and glass beer bottles. And he came to me one day and he says, Malcolm, you're crazy. There's no such things as UFOs. There's no such things as ghosts and spirit. And he said, but I'll tell you what, Malcolm, when I die, God forbid it's many, many years from now, if there is such a thing as spirit, I'll come back. Now, George, many years transpired, and I was getting up for a day shift. We started at 6 o'clock in the morning. The wife was sleeping in bed. I went down to the kitchen. I prepared my breakfast. And then suddenly you get that feeling as if somebody is standing behind you. And I slowly turned round and I saw nothing. And I went, wow, how did I get that feeling? So I went to work, and all my colleagues at work, their heads were down and they were very sad looking. I went, come on, guys, what's the matter? Cheer up. Oh, have you not heard? Heard what? Wee Bobby Smith died last night.
Oh, jeez.
George, that's the man who said if there's life after death, he'll prove it. Never saw him, but I felt a presence. I really did.
You think he tried to come back to you?
Oh, 100%. It's just strange that I never actually physically saw him, but I could feel that presence, and you never get that. But he was there. It was definitely him, yeah.
What was the ghost shouting at you to get out of a house?
Yeah, I was when I was working in London, I was looking for a property just to rent out for a short while. And this gentleman took us to this dilapidated house. And as soon as I walked in, it was empty, some old furnishings, etc., old pictures on the wall. And I didn't like it, George. I just knew I wasn't going to take it. But I was there and I had to walk round the house with this chap. He was telling me all about it. And then suddenly, as I was walking round this dilapidated house, this voice shouted, "Get out of my house! Get out of my house!" And I turned round to see who was shouting at me. And I looked at the gentleman who was showing me around the house, and he seemed unperturbed. It's like he never heard anything. And then I felt a coldness creep down the back of my spine, and I knew that this must be a former tenant of that building. And it was her building, and she didn't want anybody ready to be there. And I said to the gentleman, look, I'm okay. I don't think I'll take this property. I think I should go now. And that was it. I was out of there.
I want to talk a little bit about the Loch Ness Monster at the top of the hour, and we'll take phone calls with you as well on some of these stories. But it seems like there are ghost stories everywhere. Has anybody ever been hurt by these things?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I've got to tell the truth. As a researcher, I shouldn't hold things back. When we deal with certain, not all, but certain poltergeist cases, and I've dealt with a few, and some of my colleagues here in England have dealt with a few, and they've told me that they've been in a poltergeist house, and the witnesses suddenly says, my back is it's burning, and they've lifted the gentleman's shirt up, and you could see deep red scratch marks appearing on that person's back. And some people get objects thrown at them, stones thrown at them, scissors that's thrown at them. I've dealt a case with scissors was thrown from an invisible force. Now, that's the nasty side. Thank goodness that doesn't happen in all cases. But when truth be told, we shouldn't shy away from the fact that, yes, to answer your question, some cases do have a nasty side, shall we say.
What was the ghost on stage with you at a Southampton, England event?
Well, I give lectures all over the world. I'm the first Scotsman to lecture in America at Laughlin, Nevada.
Yeah.
But the story about that one, Southampton, I gave a lecture and I was talking about ghostly photographs. I was showing a lot of slides of ghosts and photographs, and I love that talk. It's a great talk. And I came off my presentation and I was walking towards the foyer, and this man put his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Enjoyed your talk, Malcolm. And so did the little boy on the stage with you." I went, "What little boy?" "Oh, did you not see him?" "No." "Oh, well, it was a spirit boy. He was sitting at the edge of the platform, the stage, with his legs dangling over the stage, and he looked like an old clothing, Victorian England clothing." I said, honestly, I never saw him. And this is what's so lovely when I give my lectures to people. People come up and share their stories, George. You know, they've never told their mother, their father, their uncle, their brother about them, but they see somebody like me and they say, "Look, I've got to tell you this. I've never told my husband, but I'm going to tell you." And this is why I love getting these stories, and this is why I write books as well, because information, George, is for the people and not for filing cabinets. You got to get these stories out, you know.
Absolutely. Malcolm, where can people get your books?
They can get them on Amazon. I've written 11 books at the moment. I'm on my 12th, but there's a combination of ghosts, spirits, Loch Ness, and everything else, on Amazon.
And your website I have is paranormalbooks.co.uk. Is that yours?
That's a friend's of mine, but you can see my books on that website as well, yes.
And you're on Facebook too?
Indeed I am, and I welcome any of your listeners to join me on Facebook and share their stories.
Under Malcolm Robinson?
That's correct, yeah.
All right, we're going to come back and talk about the Loch Ness Monster and phone calls next with you on Coast to Coast. And when we come right back with our special guest, Malcolm Robinson, we're going to talk about the Loch Ness Monster, then take your calls on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Malcolm Robinson with us. His books are all linked up at his website and Amazon. Just type in his name, Malcolm Robinson, and they will all show up. Malcolm, the Loch Ness Monster has captured the imagination of so many people over the years. What do you think is in that loch?
Well, clearly there's something there. That goes without saying. So many countless thousands of people, not only in Scotland, but visitors from around the world have seen that. We would like it to, before I give you my explanation, some people would like it to be a prehistoric plesiosaur, but that's not the case, because they could not extend their necks vertically. And for me personally, I think it's probably a large mutated eel. Now, yes, eels don't tend to come to the surface, but it possibly could be that. I mean, I've interviewed so many people across many years who claim to have seen Nessie. One of the best was Father Gregory Brucey, who in 1971 had a friend from Westminster Cathedral came up to Scotland. He took him down to the jetty at Loch Ness, and the loch was like a sheet of glass, not a ripple. And suddenly, Father Gregory said to his friend, well, there you go. You're up from England, there's Loch Ness. Now, as if on cue, this long neck with a small sheep-like head thrust up from the bowels of Loch Ness and just cascaded back into the depths of Loch Ness. And this is the thing, it's not an air-breathing animal for sure, because back in 1987, Operation Deep Scan, this was a flotilla of the most sophisticated boats with the best sonar at that time, traversed the loch up and down for a number of days with the best sonar equipment, and they managed to record something in excess of about 20 feet diving down into the depths of Loch Ness. So there's something there for sure, and I firmly believe that it needs more investigation.
Who took that famous Loch Ness picture of the creature of something with its neck sticking out of the water? Was that the priest?
No, that was somebody else that took that photograph. That's your classic, iconic photograph of the Loch Ness Monster. It's been seen pictorially all over the world, but it is a fake. It was somebody who made that. It's like a plasticine model, a large neck and a small head, and it was gelled onto a little toy submarine. It was pushed out into the loch, and it was photographed in black and white. And it did the rounds, it went all over the world as proof that Nessie exists, and all the time it was a hoax, which thankfully was explained back in 1994, I think.
What was the great film director Steven Spielberg's involvement with this and your plan to capture Nessie?
Yeah, what happened there, George, was I took a phone call from one of the Scottish newspapers, and this reporter says, Malcolm, if you could prove Nessie, how would you go about it? And he says, the reason I ask you, Malcolm, is we have Ted Danson is coming to Scotland. He's doing a movie on Loch Ness, and we're doing a wee feature on this. I says, well, yes, I have a plan. So, George, I would like you and your listeners to imagine a boxing ring, just a normal boxing ring with ropes. Only this would be much, much more taller vertically, and it would be secreted in the shallow part of Loch Ness. Now, inside this would be this machine continually turning out a fish puree as an attractant. On the ropes of this ring would be spherical balls containing radio biopsy darts. So any large creature, it swims into this, pushes against the ropes, and it's like pulling the pin of a grenade. All these radio biopsy darts would then go straight into the creature, not killing it. It would neutralize it, and it would send divers down, and lo and behold, would have the answer. So this reporter went away. He came back the following day, and he says, Malcolm, you'll never believe who's interested in funding your trap. I went, who? He went, Steven Spielberg. I went, you're joking. So long story short, Steven Spielberg was prepared to put the money up for this trap, but as luck would have it, my luck, bad luck, he went away to do other movies, and the plan fell flat. But however, I still believe it's a viable proposition to capture something. Now, the thing is, Loch Ness Nessie is protected by an old Inverness bylaw, which states that anyone who harms or kills the creature will be imprisoned. So maybe it's not a great idea after all.
Remember that picture that was in one of the scientific journals of what looked like a plesiosaur's fin or flipper?
Yes, That was Dr. Robert Rines came over to Loch Ness in 1971, and they had hydrophones and had specialised equipment, and they secreted these cameras in Loch Ness, and some of the photographs claim to show, firstly, we have what looks like this gargoyle-like head, and I'll come to that in a moment. The second one was this large, bulbulous body with a flipper and a long, extended neck. Now, these are underwater photographs. And then the third one, and the one that really did the rounds by the world's press, was a rhomboid or diamond-shaped flipper. By God, yes, it looked like a flipper all day long. However, that photograph was enhanced in America, and it looks like somebody's shaded along the lines of that diamond to create this visual idea that it's a flipper. When you look at that photograph in its original state, without all the chicanery of the gizmos sorting it out, you can't see anything. You can't make out any indication that it's a flipper at all. The one that surprised me was this long, bulbous body and neck. That was quite strange. Now, I mentioned the gargoyle photograph. That was taken. However, some years later, some divers went down to that location where that photograph was taken, and lo and behold, they found a tree stump which looked all deformed. And when you put it side by side with a photograph from the 1970s, it looks pretty similar. Obviously, you have deterioration with the loch, the waters, etc. They look very. I honestly believe that sonar is the best evidence to state that there is something in Loch Ness now. Even if that is a mutated large eel, then fine. Yeah. We're finding species of insects on this planet on a daily basis, George. Frogs, insects, new species. We could speak all day about the Sasquatch, Bigfoot. That's another program, I guess. But yeah, Nessie, for me, there's something there. Yeah.
Is there a family of creatures down there, or just a few?
Well, it would need to be a family of creatures to sustain this enigma, which has transpired over the years.
Right.
At the end of the day, Scotland has a tradition of these water monsters, or kelpies, as we say in Scotland. So, yeah, there's more than one, yeah.
Has a body ever washed up on shore or anything like that?
No, nobody has washed up on shore. That would be great if it did. But all we have really is sonar evidence and eyewitness testimony. And of course, I went down in a submarine in Loch Ness back in 1994. But there's a lot of testimony there, yeah.
Let's take some calls for you. East of the Rockies, Joe in Long Island, New York. Hey, Joseph, go ahead.
Hi, Malcolm. I have a couple of questions. First is, like you say, for example, the hawk or owls there, they seem to be almost spying on people. You do wonder if they're relaying information to people in the woods or something and operating as part of a network. And then also musically, this Celtic music, is that all innocent, or is there something behind that, almost like the sirens of Odysseus? Or do you see that as just, traditional music and completely innocent?
Yeah, it's traditional music, Joe. It's mythology, the siren music, etc., that was used at various lakes and lochs in Scotland to try and entice these creatures out of the water. But I tend to think it's probably more mythology than anything like that, yeah.
What was your other question, Joe?
Yeah, like if you look at Harry Potter in the woods, for example, like birds, owls, or there seems to be like a network of where the people aren't watching them, they're being watched. This idea of being watched. Who is watching you in the woods, for example, in Scotland, Ireland, for example?
Well, it's a very good question. People say that these birds, these owls, it could just be something like it's like a disguise. I mean, we could go back and talk about the greys. Sometimes they appear as owls or appear as some other creature, not showing their true identity. But clearly, I think when these strange things happen, they are people who are just watching how humankind interacts with the phenomena. And if they disguise themselves as birds or owls or what may be, then that's equally interesting, yeah.
Next up, we have Steve in Tucson, Arizona. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Malcolm.
Hi, Steve.
How's your scotch?
Very much Scotch, yes.
I can tell, but I'm French.
What's your question, Steve?
You believe all these animals have had millennia to watch us?
Rephrase that again.
All these Pleistocene animals,
yes,
have had millennia to stay out of the way.
Do you understand him at all, Malcolm?
I think so. I mean, if I hear you correct, Steve, yes, indeed, there are a lot of strange animals on this planet that currently mankind is trying to get a handle on. You may be referring to, the Yeti, etc. There's no denying that there's evidence out there. They seem to be very, very, very elusive. It seems just when we've got a handle on them, ready to capture them, they disappear. We have some footage of them, etc., but footage is not true evidence. We need to really capture these creatures, have a sample of these creatures. The same applies with Nessie, of course, as well, and Ogopogo in Canada, the Canadian monster.
Tell me about Frank Searle. Who was he, Malcolm?
Well, Frank Searle, I devote a whole chapter in my book on Nessie to Frank Searle. Sadly, he was a hoaxer. He came to Loch Ness. He's an ex-army man. He came to Loch Ness in the 60s in search of Nessie, to prove Nessie exists. And he soon found out that, it's a long, long watch. Now, sadly, he started to take a lot of fantastic photographs of Nessie above the surface of the water, the humps, the neck, etc. I mean, these were just incredible photographs. But as it turned out, and it's a long story short, they were just fakes. He faked them all, and he disappeared from Loch Ness. He still has a role to play in the Loch Ness Enigma, even though he was a hoaxer. But he brought the interest back to the boil. We had Japanese tourists coming over. We had tourists from Russia coming over at that time. But he's a kind of seedier part of the Loch Ness story, sadly.
How often is there a sighting in the loch?
Well, it depends. There is a reporting agency that you can report your sightings to. There's also loch cams situated at the loch on a stream basis from anywhere in the world. You can see that. But generally speaking, it depends who wants to report it. At the moment, you're probably only looking. I think we've only had about 4 or 5 sightings since January of this year. But how many sightings go unreported? For everybody that sees a UFO, how many people behind that person says, yeah, I saw it, I'm not going to report it. So it's one of these things in life that we need to go public to be honest and upfront and say, look, come on, tell us your stories. We need them.
East of the Rockies, Sue is with us in North Carolina. Hi, Sue. Go ahead.
Again, you got the interest back.
Sue?
The huddy-guddy man.
Coming over with tourists from Russia.
We're on a delay, folks. Don in Alberta, Canada. Go ahead, Donald.
Hi, George.
Hi.
A long time ago on your show, there was one of the most detailed interviews I've ever heard about a guy that had got really close and got good pictures. But this thing came ashore, and it ate like half a cow. And the game warden confiscated his camera.
Yep.
And he had a piece of tooth, though. And he described it as being like a shark's tooth. I don't know how. That was probably could have been 15 years ago where this interview was on. So somewhere in your archives is a really, really detailed interview with the man that was out there looking for it, came across it. But the fact that it come ashore and could eat half a cow, that was amazing. Anyway, it's not some fuzzy little pet that you'd want to take home or
no.
Go try to catch it.
That's absolutely true. Did you hear the story of the large tooth that was found out that way, Malcolm?
Yeah, that's news to me, George. I'm not disputing that a gentleman came on the radio some time ago and relayed that story, but that one's news to me. There are a few alleged sightings of Nessie on land, and I tend to kind of dismiss them. Because I don't believe that it's an air-breathing animal. I could be wrong, absolutely I could be wrong, but Since those sightings of Nessie on land, we're talking about the 1920s, and since then nothing has allegedly come on land. But that's interesting what Donald had to say about that gentleman and the story eating a cow and the tooth. But I find it hard to believe. But I wouldn't poo-poo it, but it's hard to believe.
Is there anything supernatural with the Loch Ness Monster?
Well, some people have said that when the famed occultist Aleister Crowley had a house there at Boleskine on the shores of Loch Ness, he did a lot of magic spells there, and people have surmised that maybe he conjured up this tulpa, this demon, and maybe that's what's been seen in the loch. However, we have to bear in mind that sightings of Nessie go way back before Aleister Crowley came to the loch. Is it a supernatural being? Is it some form of tulpa-like creature? And what I mean by that, George, is you have many people all over the world maybe thinking about going to Loch Ness, thinking about seeing the creature, and then suddenly, by some mechanism unknown, something happens. We know that a Canadian group managed to conjure up an image of a cavalier who they sat in seance for, gave him a false name, gave him an imaginary status. He wasn't real, but after about a year, after thinking and demanding this gentleman come forward, he did. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe.
If this is indeed an eel, and I've heard that from a couple other sources as well, Malcolm, is it deformed or it's big, right?
It's got to be big, yeah. I mean, because there's no denying, sonar has always stated that there's something in excess of 13 to 20 feet long in Loch Ness. Absolutely, we know that. What makes it interesting for me is from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, we had the long neck, the small head, we had maybe one hump or two humps. Then in the 90s, we had photographs, and they're out there on the internet, of this long, slender neck sticking out from Loch Ness with a small head, and a series of photographs were taken, which you see it coming up, staying there, and cascading back into the loch. No humps, just this long neck, like an eel. So there's a story to be told for sure. We need to find out what's going on here.
They really do. Malcolm, we're going to come back and wrap things up with you in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with our final segment with Malcolm Robinson. And let's go to the phones. AC's with us in Cleveland, Ohio. AC, welcome.
Hello, George, and hello, Malcolm.
Hi there.
In the 1960s, there was a fish that for years scientists had claimed was prehistoric. And they said it existed some millions of years ago, and they caught a couple of them off the coast of Madagascar. And the anti-creation scientific community had egg on their face. And it's interesting, but in the book of Job, there's two creatures described that could only be dinosaurs, chapter 40 and 41. And the Loch Ness Monster is an interesting creature because if they ever got one out of there, it would disprove a lot of people's theories.
That's an interesting point. I would love for it to be, as you mentioned earlier, Malcolm, a plesiosaur, but I don't know if it is or not.
Yeah, I don't think so, but AC has quite a good comment there. He's quite correct. The coelacanth fish was caught off the coast of Madagascar. You're quite right, caller, in 1938, and that was a prehistoric fish. It was thought extinct for thousands and thousands of years, if not millions, and it suddenly is now coming up as a horrible, scaly fish. So if something like that can be found in the depths of our oceans, then who knows what's also in our lakes and lochs. You know, when we look at the Mariana Trench, the biggest, deepest trench under the oceans, who knows what we may find? You know, we know more about the surface of the moon than we do what's under the planet's oceans.
Absolutely. Malcolm, I want to thank you for being part of the program. Let's not let 13 years go by this time, okay?
Yes, we must do it again soon, George.
You take care of yourself. Malcolm Robinson, last on with me in 2010. Wow. Here's something for a lot of people to just sit back and enjoy.
The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe.
True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad? Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ah, would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight, but I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber, and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he has passed the night. So you see he would have been a very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close-fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on, steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew this sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it was welled up from my own bosom, deepening, with its dreadful echo, the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him.
He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with all these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with a perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the sense? Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eve. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder. I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His Eve would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such as a sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God! No, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew, they were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here! It is the beating of his hideous heart.
For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Binnall, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.